Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm Gauthier Bouche. I'm the Director of Clinical Research at the Anticancer Fund, a non-profit research organization funding clinical trials. I'm also a research fellow at the MRC Clinical Trials Units at the University College London. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to give this talk, which will be about optimizing the funding of optimization trials. And I would argue that we have, as a community, to think about the long term. I want to start with my disclosure. I have no financial disclosure, but I need to disclose that I'm not a health economist, and I want to apologize for any mistake I will make in my economical estimation and calculation. So here, we're all here because we believe in optimization trials, and I would like to start my talk with three self-evidences, three truisms. The first one is that irrespective of what you ask or a medicines agency asks to a pharma company before the drug gets on the market, there will be always a need to optimize its use once it's on the market. So I think that's a very important point to make, meaning that optimization trials are here to stay. Second, as doctors, we know patients can get better physically and mentally with an optimized use of a given drug. That's also a self-evidence. And the third one, which might sound a bit cheesy, is that a penny saved thanks to an optimization trial is actually a penny earned by someone. And that last truism is absolutely essential in the context of my talk. And I want to state the importance of this by giving you two figures. The first one is that if you take an average person in Belgium, like here on the Grand Place in Brussels, his or her lifetime salary contribution to healthcare, so his taxes plus the taxes that his employer will have to pay, will be 135,000 euro. That's for healthcare only. And if you contrast that with another figure, which is a 1-year adjuvant pembrolizumab drug cost in non-small cell lung cancer, which is 118,000 euro, you will agree with me that if on top of the drug costs you add the hospitalization, the material, and other stuff that are other costs that aren't necessary for a full treatment, then this is more or less equal. So actually, what we see here is a fact in Belgium, in our society. The lifetime contribution of one person will cover 1 year of adjuvant pembrolizumab. And we can be sad or happy with that, doesn't really matter. But as a trialist doing optimization trials, I see here a massive opportunity because this is so expensive. Because this is so expensive, if you want to optimize the use, you reduce the dose, it gives you important funding for running those trials. So optimization trials will not succeed if they don't meet all of those points here. So I will focus on the funding part, but I think it's very important to mention the others as well. First of all, patients should be willing to participate in those trials. And I know there will be talk later today, including one from Sophie Merrick from the clinical trial units I'm affiliated to, about a patient perspective, which is extremely important to assess before you engage and embark in such a trial. The second point is that investigators must be willing to include patients as well. The third point is that the design and the conduct of the trial will allow a proper answer and a definitive answer to the question or the questions, if there are several included in the trial. The fourth point is about timeliness. There is, for every optimization question, there is a time window where the question is relevant. If you pass that time window, then the question is not relevant anymore, and your optimization trial will probably be obsolete. There's also, importantly, a need to think from the beginning at the clinical implementation of your findings. And of course, now I'm going to follow my talk with this one specifically. Funding must be available. And funding is really crucial on two aspects. For the timeliness, if funding is complicated to get, then the trial will be postponed and it will come too late. Second is that if the funding is not available quickly and substantially, then investigators will probably not be willing to participate as well. I want to illustrate that with, the power of self-financing trial with one specific example that's from a long time ago. So Persephone, which was a trial conducted in the UK, I think initiated in 2006, randomized 4,000 breast cancer patients to either 6 months of trastuzumab or 12 months of trastuzumab, with 12 months being the standard. This is a non-inferiority trial with a primary endpoint of disease-free survival. The results were those, meaning that it met its primary endpoint of non-inferiority in terms of disease-free survival, and it also demonstrated non-inferiority in terms of overall survival. I'm not very much interested in discussing the details of that trial, except for the funding of it and the savings that this trial actually caused to the NHS. So Persephone had a nice substantial grant from the National Institute of Health Research in the UK, approaching £2.7 million. But actually the savings that Persephone did just by randomizing 2,000 patients in the 6 months arm approached £20 million. The interesting thing here is that the NIHR belongs to the Department of Health and Social Care, as is the NHS, because NHS is overseen by the Department of Health and Social Care. So I would argue that the earnings are from the Department of Health and Social Care amount to £17 million. This is what the NHS has earned thanks to the trial. If you don't do the trial, you don't earn that. But that money has vanished, I guess, has been used for something else, with actually, no control on what has happened with that money, and no one can claim it back. So in a sense, because the University of Cambridge was the sponsor of that trial, the University of Cambridge has given a gift of £17 million to the NHS, which is absolutely fine, but I'm not sure they realized it. And so what I would like to do is to travel with my time machine back to 2005 and help the Persephone investigator negotiating something with the Department of Health and Social Care. First, to be ready for that meeting, we need an estimation of savings that the trial will do, and that's quite straightforward. If you have 50% less drugs, you will, on average, save 10,000 per patient in the 6 months arm. We have approximately 2 patients. We plan to have 2,000 patients in the 6 months arm. That will save in total £20 million. We know we need approximately 3 million to run the trial. Now, I would also argue an attempt to negotiate with the Department of Health and Social Care. I would tell them, we don't do the trial, you have to pay for 20 million. We do the trial, you'll earn 17 million. So we would want to have a percentage of that 17 million, not for our personal benefit or gain, but for answering another trial question, which may not be self-funding, or for the clinical trial network itself, because we know that it's usually underfunded or understaffed. If not, then we may decide not to do the trial. So I don't know what that conversation how this conversation would end, but I have to realize that we can't travel back in time. So now we're back to 2023, and I want to ask those questions and try to get an answer If not now, then in the future. So first question is, are optimization trials happening or endangered? Second question is that, is there any negotiation with payers happening at the moment? And third question is that, is there any payer willing or actually doing a specific funding scheme for optimization trial that are self-financing? The good news is that optimization trials are really happening, and I think they're even more important today than before, and that's why there's so many people interested in this OCCA conference as well, by the way. And so if we focus on immune checkpoint inhibitors here, I've used the table that was in that paper from IRCH published last year, end of last year, in Nature Medicine, about the anti-PD-1 optimization trials. What I did is I looked at where the funding was coming from, and I would like to thank all of you who actually answered my email when it was not clear from the public information. And I classified in 3 different colors, whether the payer was involved or there was any government agency involved. So in green are 2 exceptions, both from the Netherlands, where it's actually the payers paying for those trials. You see in a sort of yellow orange, which is the majority of the trials where a government agency is involved, but it's not the payer directly. And then there's the third category, where actually in blue, where there's no payer nor any government agency involved. So it comes from institutional funding or from charities. The good news is that those optimization trials can get funding from somewhere, which is a very positive thing. Now, the other question I was interested in was whether there was any negotiation in this. And I'm using a rather straightforward trial, which is PULSE, a French trial, which will, in non-small cell lung cancer, again, in the advanced setting, test whether the classical pembrolizumab, 400 milligram every 6 weeks, will be compared to pembrolizumab 200 milligram every 6 weeks, is non-inferior. So this is a 50% dose reduction, which is quite substantial. PULSE is funded by a grant from the French National Cancer Institute, a grant of 1.7 million euro. The savings per 6-week cycle in the experimental arm will be close to 4 million. And so if we look at the data from the pivotal trial in that specific population, it is expected that patients will receive a mean of 5 6-week cycle, meaning that the expecting saving will be close to 20 million. So again, we're very similar situation than almost 20 years ago. Well, this is happening, and there's no negotiation on what should be done with the earnings that the health insurance system in France will make. So I decided to come up with this flow chart that we can, and I welcome any feedback on that, but which is a good starting point to discuss and negotiate with potential payers. So how to get funding for your optimization trial? The first question you need to ask yourself is whether your optimization trial will be self-financing. So you do the rough estimation that I just made for a couple of trials. If the answer is no, then you have to apply to traditional grant schemes. If the answer is yes, you need to ask yourself a second question, which is whether savings will greatly exceed the trial cost. And you need to do that before you approach the payer. And if the answer is no, then you need to approach the payer and say, okay, this is a self-financing trial, so can you please cover the cost of it? If the answer is yes, then on top of asking for the payer to cover the trial costs, I would argue that you need to start some sort of negotiation, not for your personal gain and benefit again, but for the clinical trial group or for the clinical trial units doing those academic trials. And if you're happy with the compromise, then you can go ahead. If you're not happy with the compromise, you always have that card that you can play, which is cancel the trial, meaning that you may not want to spend 10 or 15 years of your lifetime in a trial, knowing that actually the health system is not really rewarding you for doing this for the benefit of the society. The third question I wanted to answer in 2023 is whether any payer have funding scheme in place for optimization trial that are self-financing. And I will look at 4 jurisdictions or countries. And I apologize that I cannot cover other. I would be very happy to get questions or comment on other initiative after the talk. The first one, which is a very interesting one, comes from the Netherlands. And then there's also the British situation that's been covered yesterday, thanks and presented by Dr. Corris in her talk, which is under development. And I'm not going to comment on that. I will refer to that specific talk. Then there is the Optimization Research Fund proposal by Gauthier Bouche and colleagues that I'll touch upon. And then I want, as a European, I want to ask the question on how the European Union could actually contribute to such optimization trial funding. The first one from the Netherlands is called TreatMeds. So TreatMeds is a consortium of 10 healthcare insurance companies, also known as payers. It has an annual budget of 5 million euro. Of importance, it's not a revolving fund, meaning that the saving from a given trial will not flow back to the fund. And I discussed with TreatMeds leadership, and I would like to thank them for sharing some more information with me. Their criteria for funding are pretty simple. The first one is that it has to be self-financing. You do your cost estimation and the saving estimation. And it has to be low risk in the sense that the question needs to be timely and have clinicians buy-in, patient buy-in as well. In terms of timeline, it might be sustained, but only if there is a positive overall evaluation after some years with no specific on how that's going to be evaluated. The other country and proposal I want to present is the one proposed by Gauthier Bouche and colleagues, but the Government Payers Optimization Research Fund. So here, government payers, so CMS and VA, could actually invest a bit in that ORF budget as a one-time investment, and then they will design all together, meaning with the government payers, but also the US FDA, as well as the clinical trial network group, the group in that network. They would co-design the dose optimization clinical trial, conduct them. Of course, once you have the results, you implement them, make your savings, but any saving coming directly from the trial will flow back to the ORF budget, meaning it making it self-sustainable, which would be wonderful. Finally, in Europe, I guess it would be important to see how the European Union could contribute. For those of you who are not in the EU, you need to know that healthcare is the responsibility of each member state, meaning that the European Union is not involved in the healthcare system of the different countries. So it's most likely that there will be national initiative mainly, and Europe will not do anything about that. Those national initiatives are in particular relevant for large countries who can actually conduct trials on their own, such as Germany, Spain, France, and Italy. Now there's one alliance of the insurers, whether they are like social insurances or healthcare insurances, which is called the European Social Insurance Platform. And they have 2 specific committees that are very relevant, the Health Policy Committee and the Medicine Evaluation Committee. And so my plan is to them and maybe ask the question whether they could help facilitating any supranational effort to run those optimization trials, meaning that if the Dutch have a great idea that's already financed with TreatMeds, but we want a prompt execution of that trial by opening it in other countries, just to see whether other health insurance companies in other countries or else insurance government agency would be interested in supporting that trial as well. Yeah, for the final couple of minutes, I want to sidetrack a bit, but I'll come back to funding and explain to you why this is important. But I want to sidetrack a bit on the type of trial we're thinking of. So most optimization trial will be about equivalence and non-inferiority. In that paper from Overbeek and colleagues, we can see that there is a scheme on what you need to achieve depending on the question you ask. So you may want to demonstrate equivalent exposure, that might be enough. You will have to demonstrate non-inferiority if, for example, you lower the dose or if you do early discontinuation. And then if your drug you think is actually not sufficiently dosed and you want to increase in one specific population, you want to show superiority to the standard dose. But there's one thing missing here, which I think is coming from very good work done in the US by Bob Gate and Pierre Lee Moffitt Cancer Center, which is about the use of adaptive therapy. So adaptive therapy is a way to administer treatment which is individualized to each patient. So you use a biomarker or tumor response to decide whether the patient will go on a treatment break or not. We used to work with intermittent therapy, which is given exactly the same way in all individuals. But here, the key is to adapt that to every individual patient. And by doing that, if you have a very effective therapy, then you prevent the occurrence of resistance, which is quite important. So by giving less drug and allowing treatment breaks, you might actually prolong survival, which would be a really nice thing to have. And I want to, in the context of the immune checkpoint inhibitors, I want to highlight that paper, and there's another one with EP actually as well, but there's no publication yet, another trial, where they used nivolumab in metastatic renal cell carcinoma, and they treat for a couple of cycles. And then if there was more than 10% reduction in the tumor burden, then they would stop the treatment. And as you can see in those 5 patients, very small numbers, I agree with you. In those 5 patients, then most of them could actually stop for a very, very long time. And when the tumor grows again, then you can start the treatment again. And if it reduces again, then you can stop the treatment. So it can go on and off for quite a long time, and you will reduce the number of doses you need, and at the same time, you might prolong survival. And in one of the trials I previously mentioned from that table, the stopgap trial from Canada and also running in Australia, there is an adaptive feature in it. If you look at the right-hand side of the scheme, patient randomized to stop therapy can actually restart the treatment if like the progressive disease is more than 3 months from stopping. They can restart and stop again when there is maximum tumor response, which is an adaptive feature that will be very interesting to look at. And I guess the results might actually show potentially some benefit of that strategy. And why I'm insisting in this in the end of my talk is because superiority is very attractive and appealing to funders in general. And I guess that's why if there is that possibility, we should certainly not neglect it and forget about it. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention. I'm very happy to take any question. Thank you.